For our sports skill analysis project, we are going to look at the analysis of a free throw shot. The first phase we are going to talk about is the stance phase. During the stance phase, the player stands shoulder width apart facing the hoop. There is slight adduction, retraction, and slight downward rotation of the shoulder girdle. The shoulder girdle consists of the scapular bone and the clavicle bone. The shoulder muscles include the trapezius, serratus anterior, rhomboids, pectoralis minor, and levator scapulae. The shoulder girdle involves muscles that are mostly used in stabilization of the shoulders. Prime stabilizers in your shoulder joint are the rotator cuff muscles, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. These muscles are important for stabilization but do not play a major role in this movement. While Aaron is holding the ball, you can see the pronator teres is used to balance the ball in a pronated position. Some of the muscles being used while the wrist is slightly extended include the extensor digitorum, extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor carpi ulnaris, extensor indicus, extensor digiti minimi, extensor pollicus longus, and extensor pollicus brevis. While lowering your legs, there is hip flexion, but the muscles are not actually being used in this phase. As you are lowering your torso, your knees are flexed and there is angled dorsiflexion. While the knees are flexed, the quadriceps are lengthening, which include the rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius muscles.
Hey everyone, Jake here to break down the preparatory phase for Aaron's basketball shot. Let's start near the top of the upper extremity at the sternoclavicular joint, where we see elevation and slight retraction. The elevation is due to the trapezius upper and middle fibers, along with the help from the rhomboid and levator scapulae concentrically contracting. The retraction is due again from the trapezius middle fibers and rhomboid, but now is helped out by the trapezius lower fibers this time. As we move down to the glenohumeral joint, we see flexion and horizontal adduction. The flexion is caused by concentric contractions of the pectoralis major upper fibers, the deltoid anterior, and the coracobrachialis. Also concentrically contracting, we see the pectoralis major lower fibers, the coracobrachialis, and now both the deltoid anterior and middle fibers helping out for the horizontal adduction. At the scapulothoracic joint, we see retraction, elevation, and upward rotation due to concentric contractions. The trapezius lower and middle fibers and the rhomboid cause for the adduction. The trapezius upper and middle fibers, the rhomboid, and the levator scapulae elevate the joint, while the serratus anterior and trapezius allow for the upward rotation. A little lower at the elbow joint, we see concentric flexion due to the biceps brachii, brachioradialis, and brachialis muscles. At Aaron's radiocarpal/wrist joints on his right side, we see extension and pronation. The extension is caused by concentric contractions of the extensor muscles, such as the extensor carpi radialis brevis, the extensor carpi radialis longus, the extensor carpi ulnaris, and the extensor digitorum. The pronation is due to the pronator teres, the pronator quadratus, and the brachioradialis. Now on Aaron's left side, we see again extension, but now we see his wrist in a more neutral state, which is caused by the brachioradialis, with help from both the pronators and the supinator. At Aaron's finger joints, we see slight flexion in the fingers and thumb, and abduction at the metacarphalangeal joint and thumb. The flexion is caused by concentric contractions of the flexor digitorum superficialis, the flexor digitorum profundus, and the flexor pollicis longus. As we move to the hip joint region, we see a posterior rotation because of the gluteus maximus, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus, and biceps femoris concentrically contracting. Now, at the knee, we see eccentric flexion through the semitendinosus, the semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris long and short head muscles. To finish up, we see plantar flexion at Aaron's ankle. This flexion is due to the gastrocnemius lateral and medial head and the soleus working together to concentrically contract.
Now, I'm going to take you through the movement phase of the free throw. First, starting at the shoulder girdle, we have upper rotation and elevation. The serratus anterior, trapezius upper, middle, and lower fibers help with upward rotation, along with the rhomboids and the levator scapulae help with the elevation of the shoulder girdle. Then, we move on to the shoulder joint. We have flexion as I move my arm up to shoot the ball. The deltoid anterior fibers, pec major upper fibers, and coracobrachialis all help with flexion of the shoulder. In my right wrist, the flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, flexor carpi ulnaris, flexor digitorum superficialis, flexor digitorum profundus, and the flexor pollicis longus all assist in flexion. In my left wrist, the flexor carpi ulnaris and the extensor carpi ulnaris help with adduction. In the elbow, extension occurs when I move my arm forward to release the ball. The triceps brachii long head, lateral head, and medial head, along with the anconeus, all assist in extension. Also, for me to be able to handle the ball, pronation occurs. The pronator teres and the pronator quadratus assist with pronation. Moving on to the wrist joint, I have flexion in my right wrist, along with adduction in my left wrist. During the free throw, the lumbar spine and the hip joint are both static. In the lumbar spine, the flexors rector abdominis, external oblique on both sides, and the internal obliques on both sides all have isometric contractions. In the hip flexors iliacus, the psoas, rectus femoris, sartorius, and pectineus also are isometrically contracting. In the knee joint, as I bend my knees, we have flexion. The rectus femoris, biceps femoris, popliteus, semimembranosus, and semitendinosus all assist with flexion of the knee.
Hey guys, it's Clark. I'm going to take you through the follow-through phase, and we'll see what's happening in each of these joints. Let's first start off in the upper extremity at the scapular thoracic joint. We see elevation, upward rotation, and protraction. We see the trapezius muscles, mainly its upper and middle fibers, involved in elevation and upward rotation. We see involvement with the levator scapulae in elevation, and with protraction, we have the serratus anterior, subclavius, and the pec minor. All these muscles are concentrically contracting to allow these movements to occur. With elevation and protraction, we also see these exact same movements in the sternoclavicular joint, and it is caused by these exact same muscles in the scapular thoracic joint. Now looking at the glenohumeral joint, we see flexion, horizontal adduction, and just a little bit of internal rotation. The deltoid, mainly the anterior portion of it, is involved in all these movements. And we see the pec major involved in the main two, the flexion and the horizontal adduction. However, its two different sections of fibers are involved in the two different movements. With the horizontal adduction, we also see the coracobrachialis involved. With internal rotation, we see more of the back muscles like the lats, the teres major, and the subscapularis. Also, the rotator cuff muscles help provide stability for this joint throughout the movement. Now, all these muscles causing the movements are concentrically contracting, and the rotator cuff muscles provide more of an isometric contraction with some concentric, depending on the movement. Moving distally towards the elbow joint, we see extension caused by the triceps and the anconeus by performing a concentric contraction. With the antagonist muscles like the biceps, the brachialis, and the brachioradialis, they are eccentrically contracting in order to help slow down that movement towards the end of the phase. However, depending on which one's working more on each side depends on the hand position. The left hand is in a more neutral position, which provides a better line of pull for the brachioradialis, and the pronated position on the right side provides more line of pull for the biceps brachii. Now looking at the wrist or the radiocarpal joint, we see flexion in the right hand and ulnar deviation in the left. Both wrist flexors are concentrically contracting, and both wrist extensors are eccentrically contracting to also slow down the movement towards the end. However, in the left hand, we have the extensor carpi ulnaris concentrically contracting in order to help with the ulnar deviation. Also, on the right hand, since it is more pronated, all the pronators are isometrically contracting throughout the movement. On the left hand, we have more involvement with the brachioradialis since it's in a more neutral position, with some help from the pronators and the supinators. Now looking at the fingers, we see flexion also occurring here, so the flexors are going to concentrically contract. With the extensors, they're eccentrically contracting to slow down the movement. And on the left side, we have the adductor pollicis longus assisting in adduction and assisting with the ulnar deviation. Looking now at the lower extremity, we have extension in the hip. This is due to the hamstrings, which is a group of 3 different muscles, and the gluteus maximus concentrically contracting to allow the movement. With the core muscles, like the erector spinae and the abdominals, these are here to help keep that core tight and help stabilize the spine. Moving distally towards the knee or the tibiofemoral joint, we have extension. This is due to the quadriceps, a group of 4 muscles including the rectus femoris and the 3 vastus muscles. They concentrically contract at the beginning of the phase, but at the end we start to see more of an eccentric contraction and a more bend in that knee. Moving down towards the end of the lower extremity at the ankle, we have plantar flexion, which is mainly due to the gastrocnemius and the soleus, as well as with assistance from all those other muscles as you see there. We also see concentric contraction at the beginning, and towards the end of the movement we have eccentric contraction of these muscles at the end of the movement.
For the recovery stage, you can see that his hip is flexed, involving the iliopsoas muscle. The knee is also flexed, involving the bicep femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus, while his ankle is dorsiflexed at the tibialis anterior. After releasing the ball, his arm is extended and his shooting hand flexes. His wrist is still extended and he will have to regain his balance after the free throw shot. Aaron's shoulders are protracted at the scapulothoracic joint with very little internal rotation. He is flexed at the glenohumeral joint while his elbow is isometrically contracting in extension.
Okay.
It was a backpack.